Great, everybody. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Polka. I'm the founder of Code for America and a former US Deputy Chief Technology Officer. And as of about 2.5 weeks ago, I'm also the proud co-founder with several others on this call of the United States Digital Response. We are an effort, volunteer-led, but I would have to say very professionally, to match volunteers, technologists from across the country to support governments in their crisis response to COVID-19. And I hope that's what you're here for, because that's what we're going to talk about today. We're holding this webinar to provide an overview of US digital response, USDR, including doing some deeper dives into the projects that we've been working on and discussing how you might work with us and we might work with you, as well as sharing an update on our volunteer matching. We are recording this session and we plan to make it available on our website later, so keep that in mind as you ask questions. To start, we wanted to do a quick poll to follow up on the question that we asked in the registration and to give our speakers a sense of who is here. So please take a moment right now. I will be silent and fill out that form that should have popped up when you came in. Everybody doing it? Great. I don't think it's a long poll, so I'm going to keep going in the assumption you're able to do that real quickly. Speaking of doing things like polls, logistics for these webinars. If you can't hear or see, or you have other issues in engaging here, let us know by chat. The wonderful Taylor Campbell is managing that, and she'll be able to help you out. So test out the chat. Some of you have already been doing it. Garrett says he didn't see a form. Okay, we'll get there. The chat should be, depending on what browser you're using, probably in the bottom of the screen, but look around for it. Make sure you can communicate with us and just say hello. Nice to see so many names in there. Hi, Marina. Hi, Dan. Hi, yes, I'm also in Oakland. Excellent, excellent. You're all very good at it. Thank you very much. If you have a substantive question about what's going on in the world with USDR and others, rather than putting it in the chat, we want you to put that in the Q&A feature, and it should be right next to wherever you just found the chat. And so that is the part that Corey Zarek, one of our co-founders and also former Deputy US Chief Technology Officer, is going to be monitoring. So she'll be surfacing the questions that you have during this and feeding them to us so that we can answer as many of your questions as possible during the time that we have. And hopefully we'll be able to answer all of them, but if not, we'll follow up. We can certainly reach out. So let's see, anybody have any major concerns in the chat so far? Are we all more or less able to get in here? It looks like everyone's able to say hello. Is the chat only visible to panelists? I can't see it. I'm going to let Taylor take that. That's AJ Pape has that question. Great. Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to kick this off. I'd like to start by introducing USDR co-founder and our actual CEO. Believe it or not, we have a CEO as a 2.5-week-old organization, Raylene Young. Raylene is an amazing person. She has jumped right in based on her vast experience as an engineering executive. She spent 10 years working in companies like Facebook and Stripe, but she caught the government bug. I hope for many of us who are here and started to realize how important it is to support government. So just recently, before this COVID crisis hit us, she finished the Aspen Tech Policy Fellowship, where she spent 3 months learning about government policy making and processes so that she could apply her tech background to the policy field. And of course, then this came along and she has been leading this fantastic group of very dedicated volunteers and volunteer organizers to get US digital response off the ground and able to be providing huge impact incredibly quickly. So I'd like to, first of all, thank Raylene for her leadership in doing that. It's been very meaningful to me personally, and I think to everyone who's been involved so far. And kick it over to you, Raylene, to talk us through.
Hi, thanks, Jen. And thank you all for taking the time to join us for this session today. It's kind of the first time we're doing something like this, so bear with us as we're figuring it all out. So as I'm sure all of you have been experiencing, as we all have been, this crisis has meaningfully impacted all of our lives, whether it's how you're spending time at home or carrying on with work and adjusting to new and different ways of working. When it comes to the government, I think for some of us, especially before I started working on this, it all seemed to happen behind the scenes. While for those of you who work in government, it may be what you're focusing on day and night. The impact on government systems and services due to this crisis has been truly enormous. Many operations, entire teams and groups and agencies have had to move online for the first time. And we're seeing unprecedented levels of requests for crucial services like food benefits, small business loans, and unemployment insurance. Systems are crashing under the increased demand, and government teams are in crisis mode, just like we probably all are in different ways. So that's where we come in. In just 2 short weeks, our team has heard from over 3,000 volunteers from all over the country and even other parts of the world, all stepping up to offer their skills to support governments in their response to this crisis. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do and why we do it. So we started off, with a very small team. It was a handful of us and 1 Google form on 2 different things. One was finding volunteers. I think the idea was, how could we get more help into government teams? How do we supplement them with people? And so we focused on getting in touch with volunteers, especially with engineering and data backgrounds. The other side of the problem was also getting in touch with government groups, especially at the state and local level. We needed to talk to the people in the field and in the front lines who were facing this problem to better understand how we could help. As soon as we started these conversations, we soon realized that the skills we needed went far beyond just engineering. And we started to pull in people from a whole range of backgrounds, including design, product, operations, healthcare, supply chain management, and much more. Once we had a few more people and we got a better sense of what governments needed help with, we developed a multi-step matchmaking process to get them that help. This is mostly coordinated centrally in a core team, and the process involves everything from looking for and interviewing volunteers with specific skill sets, to reviewing existing tools or services that are already out there just to see if something's already working, to sometimes spinning up new efforts with volunteers that might share best practices or libraries that can be useful to multiple cities and states. Throughout all of it, we take a very collaborative and open approach to all of the matching that we do. We work very closely with our government partners, but also those building products and services to understand both what they need and what they need help with. And we encourage everyone to share best practices. I think in the end, one of the best products we can build is really a repository of that shared knowledge. And with that, enable any city, county, or state all over the country to learn from what's working best in other cities and counties that might be nearby. So how do we do that? I mentioned we have a very collaborative approach. And as Jen mentioned, most of my personal career has actually been spent working at private tech companies. So I'm very new to the government world. One of the most important things we've seen as a team has been to deliberately combine learnings from both sides of that. So our founders, including Jen, Corey, and Ryan, were all previously deputy CTOs for the US. So they brought in a significant amount of government experience and empathy and just knowing how things work on the inside. But many of our initial team members were seasoned tech professionals, and they helped us set up systems that helped us execute and scale quickly. Today, the core team is still about a 50-50 mix of government people and tech people. And this has helped us scale rapidly, even as we still take time to deeply understand the underlying government systems and constraints that we're dealing with. So maybe that brings us to what do we actually do and how do we do it? In this webinar, we're gonna hear about 3 different ways that we collaborate with government partners. In the first, you'll hear from Robin Carnahan, who shares how we work directly with governments to understand their needs and assess how we can help. Secondly, you'll hear from Giuseppe Morgana and Ross Dakin from the New Jersey Office of Innovation, who will share some stories about how we actually embedded volunteers in government teams directly to address a specific need. And finally, Jonathan from Cove Attack Now We'll talk about our efforts to help amplify and share existing tools with more government groups. If you have any questions for any of our speakers anytime, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box on Zoom, and we'll collect them and respond to as many as we can at the end of the session. Great. So with that, I'll start with Robin. So Robin Carnahan just wrapped up 4 years leading state and local work with 18F, the federal government's tech consultancy. Robin is also a former government official herself in her home state of Missouri. With the USDR team, she's helping to lead outreach with government teams. So Robin, what has been your approach to working with government partners, and what have you been hearing from them?
Well, thank you all for taking time to do this. I'm calling from St. Louis, where it's sunny outside today. I hope it's good where you are, and you're all well. It's nice to be with this group. You know, when I was in public office, technology was always kind of the bane of my existence. There's nothing that caused me to lose more sleep than some technology tool, because it never seemed to work, and I had to explain it and didn't really know how. And so since then, I've been doing a lot of work with states and with the federal government and with technologists, because you got to be able to deliver. And if the damn website doesn't work, the public doesn't think you're doing your job. So it's terrific to be able to be with this team. Our role in this is we're all volunteers, as Jen and Raylene said, is to just help out. Everybody on this team is patriotic and wants to figure out how they can step up and do their public service at a time of great need for our country. And we do a couple of things. We're a clearinghouse for information. We connect states and cities and counties to other good ideas that are happening in other parts of the country. And then we're a source of volunteers that can help you individually in your communities, either stand up things that are specific to you or get you reusable things that are being done in other places. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're scaling the great work of some of our local partners, because they're going to be talking a little bit later, but you should know that we're connected with the National Governors Association and League of Cities, as well as the Association of Counties and the Bloomberg What Works cities as well. So there are two main takeaways if you want to know how this team could be useful to you. Number one is tech talent to fill some specific need right now. So for example, we had a call from San Rafael, California. They were having all kinds of problems because what used to be in-person work and paper-based systems instantly needed to be remote work and remote systems. And so we were able to go in, send a team in to help them with some of the changes in telework agreements and other actions that they needed to take just to be able to function as a government. And we're able to turn that around in a couple of days. An example of some of the tech tools that are being used from one jurisdiction to another, a terrific one is helping seniors and people who are homebound that need access to food and medicine connect with neighbors who want to volunteer to do that. And it's a terrific tool. It's been stood up in several jurisdictions already. And if you're interested in that, reach out. We can help you get that done probably in just a couple of days. Another really important one that we're hearing over and over is about tracking medical facilities, hospital beds, PPE, other kinds of equipment, and being able to aggregate that data for decision makers. That's something we've been able to stand up quickly in states as well. There are other kinds of tools that look at managed tracing, contact tracing it's called, where you figure out where your positively tested patients are and get that mapped. So there's lots of things on the health part of the crisis. And the other part that we're hearing a lot about from states is the economic side. Like, what about all these benefits that are going to start flowing once the federal money arrives? $2 trillion is a lot of money, and a lot of that's going to state and local governments. We need to make sure that websites are up to date, that they can withstand extra traffic, and that they're giving the citizens the kind of information that they need, whether it's about qualifying for unemployment insurance, SNAP benefits, other kind of health benefits, or small business benefits. So those are all things that we're working to try to create reusable tools for communities. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. I guess I just close by saying that you don't have to have a specific need. We're happy to visit with you about how we can help, but just remember those are the two things. If you have something that you know is broken that you need technologists to help fix, give us a call. Likewise, if there are some of these tools that you think other communities might already have and you just want to reuse, let us know and we can help with that. Raylene, back to you unless folks have questions.
All right, thanks, Robin. Yeah, we'll save the questions for the end. I'm sure there will be some.
All right.
So thanks for sharing. That was a great overview of just the themes that you're seeing. Next, we'll actually get into a few more specific examples of work that's actually being done by some of our state partners in New Jersey. So I'll introduce Giuseppe and Ross. So you two are leading a relatively new digital service team within the New Jersey Office of Innovation. I know you both have worked in federal technology before, so you're experienced in working at this intersection of government and technology, have some years on me on that, and have probably seen a few crises in your day. New Jersey has been proactively creating some great tech resources to help your residents during this crisis, and I know we've been in a supporting role for some of your efforts. So we'd love to hear a little bit about what you've been working on and see what you've launched so far. So I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Raylene. The first thing I'd like to say is just thank you. The effort with you, the U.S. Digital Response Team, our partners in many different places have made it possible to achieve what we have been able to achieve thus far. As was mentioned, we're a small team in New Jersey formed just over a year ago as part of the Office of Innovation. And as this crisis sort of unfolded, we saw opportunities to help and partner with our colleagues across government. And as we saw more and more opportunities, we were able to actually take them on because we had the opportunity to partner with folks like USDR, YEXT, the Federation of American Scientists, and all sorts of different partners. The key for us here is with a small team, being able to come back to our partners across government and say, there are 3,000 plus volunteers that we have that are here to help. Please don't hesitate to tell us if you need help so that we can call upon them and bring them in has been really powerful. So I guess for the reason I'm excited to be here is just to express my thanks and just say it's really great to be able to engage in this community in this way. There's two projects I want to highlight here, and then I'll pass it off to my colleague Ross. The first is called Ask a Scientist. This is actually a collaboration with the Federation of American Scientists, and about a month ago we were working with them, and we realized that there was a really big need to be able to get accurate research, up-to-date scientific information out to the public, ranging from the simplest questions to much more complex ones. So what we did with them is we worked with their group and we stood up a site called Ask a Scientist, which had much research information from the WHO, CDC, but also many other validated sources. And what we did with them is we put up the site, and they were able to curate a group of over 100 volunteers who are working behind the scenes to be able to answer new questions as they come in. So if the public has an answer about coronavirus and they want to get a validated and researched answer, they can go on there, and if they can't find it, they click Ask a Scientist, and it gets routed and vetted and sent back to that individual and then shared back out with the community. And so this site is one that is up and running now, and I would encourage folks to be able to use it. It's at covid19.fas.org. And it's something that we're proud of and couldn't have accomplished without partners like FAS. The second quick project that I want to talk about is New Jersey's COVID19 Information Hub. This website was born out of the realization, similar to the Ask a Scientist site, that we needed to have a really clear way to get information out to the public that they could trust and know. And so similar to the scientific information, we had to make sure as New Jersey policies were changing, as guidance was changing, there was a place that New Jerseyans can go to get the information that they needed. And we were able to highlight the most important things at the top, but also allow them to sort and find the information that they need across the site. And so we partnered with YEXT, who was very gracious in volunteering their time, services team, to be able to work with us and in a matter of a week, be able to stand up a new site that has all of this information available. So again, another example of very close partnership, and now we're working with USDR to think about new ways to add new features. The powerful thing about as this community grows is that we're finding ways to share and build on each other. And so with this covid19.nj.gov site, what we've done is we've actually integrated the Ask a Scientist site into it. And so what's happening now is rather than New Jersey, like the government having to research and put the latest guidance out, we're automatically getting that information from the Ask a Scientist site. And even further, we're integrating. So if someone asks a question, we're able to route it back to that group of volunteers to make sure we have both the latest New Jersey information, allow us to focus on getting that out, but also be able to leverage all of that like clear scientific information. And so it's a site that's up, and there's an opportunity if folks like the site and want to use it for their own jurisdictions. The company we're working with is also partnering with others, so feel free to reach out to me after this, and I'm happy to put you in touch. But really just want to say thank you to all of the partners who have made our response possible. And I'll pass it off to Ross here.
Thanks, and yeah, definitely echoing the appreciation. That's paramount. The volunteers from USDR have effectively nearly doubled the size of our team. So the effort that I want to talk about, or the theme that I want to talk about real briefly, is with the COVID response, there's a spectrum of issues that governments are dealing with. There's safety, and there's a balance between safety and livelihood, right? On safety, we want everybody to shelter in place, but if everyone's sheltering in place, they're not spending money. And ordinances are being put in place to shut the doors of restaurants and whatnot. And so I've been helping the New Jersey Economic Development Authority basically help small businesses stay afloat during this and try to not furlough employees, et cetera. They are unlocking about $75 million worth of funds, and that's going to go out to small businesses in different ways, from grant programs to 0% loan programs to leveraged guarantees with private capital and whatnot. So with all of these new programs, it can be kind of hard for a business owner to understand and figure out what they might be eligible for. So one of the things we wanted to do is build what you see on this slide, which is assistance.business.nj.gov. It's an eligibility wizard. It's fill in 20 questions and we'll tell you of these dozen programs, right? State, local, and federal, including EIDL and whatnot, what you might be eligible for given your industry, how many employees you have, how much your annual revenue is. And so I pinged USDR with this project, and they sent a volunteer who was fabulous. His name's Nick. There's a shout out to him, and there's a GitHub repository for this if you want to use it yourself at the bottom of this site in the footer. We've actually had 2, I think, municipalities clone it so far. And basically, if you go to the next screen, it basically just gives you the results of, here's what you could be eligible for, here's what you would not be eligible for. We could not have done this. We would not have had the time to do this on our own, literally. Or we would have, but we would have been distracted and not been able to do some of the other things that we've done. So that was absolutely fabulous. Robin touched on it. The federal level is going to be unlocking funds, but there are also these state level programs, and they're different in every state, and they're different in many counties as well. So that's been fantastic. In addition to that, if you go to the next screen, one of the issues with that program is that they receive, I want to say 3,000 applications. They have received 3,000 applications through their legacy system since 2006. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we're flipping a switch and grants are going live, and we're expecting close to 20,000 in about an hour. So their existing infrastructure would not have been able to handle the load. So there's a technical load issue there. So we're helping them move things to the cloud, use COTS, off-the-shelf product, best-of-breed products that you probably use yourself that can withstand that. The other issue, though, is on the back end. These are some process maps that I've got on this slide here, that people need to take the application, run a social security number here, look up an EIN number there, and there's all this complex logic that needs to happen in these interplays between humans. And so even if the tech is fine, it can take lots and lots of time for the actual process to play out if lots of humans are involved. So we're looking at how can we simplify these processes. And again, USDR sent us a volunteer who's fabulous, background in consulting, happens to work for Microsoft, and really understands the system that we're using, the Dynamics 365 system that the agency uses, to be able to simplify a lot of this and put some efficiencies in place. For example, and the volunteer Nick, again, wrote a little script in Python that said, hey, if somebody uploads a PDF of, say, a tax clearance certificate, instead of printing that and having somebody read it, having somebody manually enter it, risk of error, we could just OCR and have the computer read the expiration date or the EIN number. And those little efficiencies times 20,000 applications are going to let us get money out the door to small business owners next week rather than in September. So that's been really fabulous. And again, couldn't have done it without USDR's help. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, if you go to the next slide, is our main COVID portal, if you will. Forgive me for saying portal. Covid19 NJgov. Within about a day and a half of standing it up, we had over 1 million users. And so you can see some of the traffic patterns here. And one of the interesting things is that we've got all this data, and I think everybody's feeling data overload or information overload. Everybody's coming at you with information about COVID in your inbox, on social media. So what is the role of government in providing the trusted voice here? And how can we make sure that our voices are actually being heard as government? And how do we make sure that we are getting the right information to the right people at the right time? So what we're doing is leveraging to more USDR volunteers, one, to help us with our analytics reporting here so that the higher ups have a good snapshot of what is happening in the state. And two, Google has been gracious in giving us a large advertising budget to essentially run a mini marketing campaign. And we just have skills gap on our team. We don't have marketing experts. That's not what we do on a daily basis. But in this case, the state is looking to our group, the digital services group, to be the leading experts on collecting this data and then disseminating the right information most appropriately. And so we've got some folks that are helping us run those programs and again, make sure that we're getting the right information into the right hands at the right time. And so I'll just end by, again, echoing our gratitude and saying that this has all been about partnerships. Giuseppe mentioned Yext, Microsoft's been fantastic. Again, Google, Flood, Qualtrics on the private sector side. And then on the volunteer side, it's been 100% US digital response. So that has allowed us to do more proverbial steering than rowing, if you will, and really deliver better services for residents than we would have been able to do on our own. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ross and Giuseppe. And I guess just from our perspective, it's been really fun to just see how much you guys have been building and taking charge here. I think I was on that email chain when we first connected you with Nick, and he, a couple hours later, was like, oh, here's a script, like, go ahead and use this. And for us, it was one of our first like early great examples of placing help. So it's been really fun to partner and see how much more we can get done. So kind of switching a bit, next up, we're going to talk to Jonathan, who is actually joining us from Alaska. So Jonathan is not only in Alaska and a member of the legislature there, but you actually helped create Cove Attack Now, which is a separate volunteer-led effort that's now in touch with states all over the country and has really helped leaders better understand the impact of coronavirus on their own communities. I know that I've personally been in some calls with government leaders across the country who we've mentioned this tool to, and I know that it's been helpful for them to look at. So why don't you tell us about Cove Attack Now? What does it do and how has it been useful to governments?
Yeah, thanks, Raylene. And am I coming through okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Great, okay. Yeah, so 19 days ago was sort of the origin of Cove Attack Now, and just sort of by way of background, I'm way up yonder in Alaska, and I was born and raised here. I represent a really rural district in the legislature, a bunch of fishing communities and logging communities in the islanded part of Southeast Alaska. So sort of a unusual profile, I guess, for involvement in a sort of national tech and sort of civic effort. But 19 days ago, I got a friend from the Bay Area, a longtime friend who's sort of involved in the tech and entrepreneurship community, but also a lot of political and sort of public service efforts. And he'd been talking with two other friends in the Bay Area, Max Henderson and Igor Kaufman. And basically the three of them were super concerned about the exponentially explosive sort of pace of growth of COVID around the world, and especially what it was looking like for the US. And they basically said, like, we're super concerned about this. My friend Zach called me and said, you know, what are you thinking? Do you want to band together and do something? And so the four of us were basically like, this is, you know, the trajectory is deeply concerning. Let's try to do something about it. And the doing something about it ended up being creating an epidemiological model that was open source, and we hosted it up online at coveattacknow.org. and it was about a 6-day sleepless wind sprint in order to pull it together. And so that launched, 12 or 13 days ago. And I was really sort of took the lane of making sure that the model reached effectively every possible decision maker in America. We emailed all 7,000 plus state legislators, a number of other networks that we sort of arranged in order to sort of get it out everywhere. And within 2 days of release, over 2% of Americans had visited the website. And we've worked with a little over 10 governor's offices directly in terms of evaluating interventions and sort of assessing the pace and growth of COVID in their state, and a lot of other jurisdictions, from the government of India to the US Department of Defense and Army Corps of Engineers. So it's been a total whirlwind as we've launched the site. And USDR has been super helpful. Jen and Erica have been able to facilitate connections with National Governors Association and Bloomberg Philanthropies, American Cities Initiative specifically. And so we're sort of charging forward, and specifically, as of last night, we just released the second big product launch or iteration on the model, which is county-specific projections for over 2,000 counties across the country. I think it's 2120 is the specific number. So you can click on any state, you can home in on a county, assuming we have data. That's the sort of lacuna between what we've got in all 3,007 counties in the country. And you can see county projections, which incorporate real-time county-specific data and basically the epidemiological projections, including possible flattening of the curve with different public health interventions. So that's where we're at. And it's we have a couple more sort of products in the pipeline that we're looking to ship actually in the coming days, but also the coming weeks. And our goal is basically to create the data tools that help America and the world beat COVID and destroy the curve, not just flatten the curve, but we want to end COVID and provide every possible tool that helps us win that fight or win that war. And I guess just one thing to flag for anybody listening, if you're with a government or sort of in touch with folks in government, if we can be helpful in providing customized models for any government, it could be a county, it could be a city, but obviously sort of state and federal too. We're at the beck and call to help, and feel free to reach out if you see an opportunity that we can add value to a local, regional, or other decision-making process. And thanks so much, Raylene and Jen, for making the opportunity available.
Yeah, thanks for all you guys are doing. I remember when I saw like an early version of this 2 weeks ago, maybe, and just seeing how far it's come, it's been really impressive. So thank you very much. So I think thanks for all the stories from Robin and Ross and Giuseppe and Jonathan. I hope it gives everyone a sense for what we've been doing. As a reminder, please add your questions to the Q&A. We're almost there, and we'll take a look. And also, I know we mentioned a lot of links and follow-ups, and we can send some updates. So don't feel like if you missed the URL while we were chatting, you won't find it again. So just to close, we'll share a little bit about the volunteers and just where we are now. So as I mentioned, we've really been blown away and really overwhelmed by the support we've gotten from the community. We have over 3,000 volunteers in our database, and I feel like every day a couple hundred or dozens at least join in. And we're working really hard on our side to set up the right matches. So right now we're mostly focused on finding ways to place help faster where it's most needed, and scaling out the projects that we know are working and getting them into more cities, states, and counties across the country. This really means focusing on two things. One, which is very top of mind, is getting in touch with more government groups so we can better understand what the most common pain points are and find ways to share best practices and solutions with them. And the second is expanding the skill sets that we're looking for in our volunteers. So as I mentioned, our needs are ever changing. And while we have a lot of engineers, which is amazing, here are a few new specialized skill sets that we're finding that we see come up more frequently in conversations. So with that, I'll leave it to Jen, and we have Q&A. Thank you.
Let me just unmute. The core skill of management today is remembering to unmute when you talk. Thanks everyone, that was fascinating, and I hope it gave you a taste of what we're doing. There's so much more that we couldn't talk about, but the stories that you just heard are a good taste. So I I wanted to start with the questions that are in the Q&A. Many of them Corey has been answering while other things have been going on, because we like to multitask these days. But I will start out, actually I'm going to start with the one I think she answered already, because it was about what Ross was talking about. If you go on usdigitalresponse.org/collaborations, you'll see some of the links. So somebody asked about an API for the Ask a Scientist website. If Ross is available to answer about an API, I invite him to do so. But in terms of a link to the code, which is open source and publicly available through their GitHub, the link to that is there on our site. Ross, are you able to speak to an API?
I am, and Giuseppe, keep me honest here. Giuseppe's closer to it. If you're interested in API access, you can email us, team@innovation.nj.gov. There's also the ability to embed the chatbot widget on your website without needing to speak with us at all, and that's the instructions for that are on that GitHub repository.
Great, thanks, Ross. Corey, I think you're able to be on the audio. Jackson Barnett asked, what is USDR doing to work with states, localities, hospitals, et cetera, to collect clean data to track the spread of the virus? Nope, this is all me. Okay, got it. We are closely affiliated with this another group that's doing a great job of that, called COVID Tracking, the COVID Tracking Project. I believe it was started by Alexis Madrigal and some others. And I think that is probably our best resource, unless someone else wants to correct me. And you would find that at covidtracking.com. Anyone else of the panelists want to chime in there?
I can jump in a little on this, because I had a conversation on this morning. I think there's a lot of work happening, I'll say. Many organizations have popped up to provide tools that help this problem at different levels. So there's some tools where it's more designed for collecting data from individual hospitals and like bubbling that up to a state or county Department of Health. And then there are other tools that are more about, like, now that you have that data, how do you analyze it and figure out what changes you might need to make? So what we're trying to do is, as Jen mentioned, we're working with specific projects like COVID Tracking. There's also RT COVID Status. I think it's .org. But what we're kind of trying to do is sort of have like a higher view of what are all these different tools out there and how do they plug into a given state or county's needs. So what I would say is, if you are at a state or county or working in a city that needs to try to solve this problem, please reach out, because we can either help assess what tools you might need and maybe even connect you with specific services or help to help you make sense of the data.
Great. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Okay, I hope that was helpful. A quick reminder, if you're asking questions, we're not monitoring the chat window for questions. You go over to the Q&A. You may find that at the bottom of your screen, I believe. And put your questions in the Q&A, because that's where we're going to be pulling from. There's another question here that I think Raylene might want to answer, and it's just, can you share more about your matching and vetting process for volunteers?
Sure. We're actually going to probably share more about this on our website too, but just to answer it live. So there's a couple things. I mean, we have a team within USDR that focuses on kind of the volunteer experience. So what we do is, we look at what people are writing in when they apply to be a volunteer. So they usually share what skill sets they have, what's their availability, where are they located. So they might say, I'm a data scientist in New Jersey and I can work, Friday evening through Monday morning. So we kind of assess that, and we know that based on a conversation or what they wrote. Then as needs come in, so, let's say the innovation team in New Jersey, they might write in and say, hey, we're working on this website. We need some front-end help. Ideally, we get it within the next, 30 hours. Then we kind of go through our volunteer database and we'll filter and sort of sort and pick out a few profiles that look like they're going to meet the needs that we have on the government side. Then we actually schedule time to talk to them. We get on Zoom or on phone and do an interview and really just talk to them, learn a little bit more about them. And then typically then we'll facilitate kind of an introduction to the government partner. So that's what it looks like. It looks a little bit different for every project because the skills are different and the partners are different, but that's a high level version of what we do.
Raylene, thanks for that. I'm going to follow up with another question that, actually two more questions that follow on from that. The first one is, what is the expectation for volunteers? Our FAQ mentions considering taking a leave of absence from your current employment to assist on projects. The questioner asks, that seems like a lot during these times of precarious employment, which is a very fair point.
Yeah, it's funny. We are literally updating that FAQ, I think today or tomorrow, because things changed a lot and we've learned a lot. So that's not something we're recommending. To answer your question, we're also going to be publishing, I think soon, a link to our volunteer oath. And that kind of shares what the requirements are. I would say they're actually more around, a lot of it's around how you behave, what are you interested in working on. I think right now in this time, we're looking for volunteers who are really happy to do whatever is necessary to collaborate with our partners and kind of come in with no ego. You put the volunteer priorities first, the government partners priorities first, your maybe personal interests take a back seat. So a lot of it is around how are you approaching the engagement. Of course, we do look for people who are responsive and communicative. As I mentioned, it's not that we need someone to drop everything to help us, but if they say they are free, from 5 to 8 p.m. on Saturday, then we hope that they are responsive when we try to reach out during that time. So I would just say it's more about being consistent with what you can provide. And that goes a very long way for us, and, really caring about the problems and kind of willing to do whatever it takes.
Great, thanks. Here's a question I'll kick off an answer to, and maybe Raylene and others would like to add to it. Is everyone involved in USDR, including founders and partners, volunteer? And why is this work not paid for by the governments and or municipalities? The answer to the first one is yes, we're all volunteer. And we're doing this because actually several of us have found ourselves, between jobs. I happened to leave my position at Code for America on January 31st. And I am blessed to have the ability to do that on a volunteer basis right now. And that is true for others, though some others, as Raylene mentioned, are working with the constraints of jobs. Why is it not paid for by government? It's a perfectly valid question. I think in the long run, of course, governments should pay for these things. But I think right now is a really unique time. It's speed at this moment, I think, to me, as an individual hoping to, as Jonathan said, flatten, or what was it? Get rid of the curve? Destroy the curve? Destroy the curve. Many of you are aware that if you do things through procurement channels, they will take some time, and we don't have time. So a lot of this is about a short-term response in which the people step up to do what's needed to make government more effective to respond to a real crisis. I'd also just say, to editorialize a little bit, I do think this is consistent with sort of how government needs to work in times like this. It's very, very hard for government to be staffed, to scale some of these programs as big as they need to, as fast as they need to. And I think that there's, deep in the history of our country, the notion that at times like this, we all lend a hand. Certainly around wars, you've seen that. I don't want to compare this to a war, but I think it is a time in which we all just need to help out. And we have to do it very quickly, which means that at least in this particular model, and there are many other models going around that are also very valid and helpful, but in this particular model, volunteer really helps with speed because we're able to just get people in there. Anybody want to add to that?
I think you nailed it, Jen. And I would just add that the three components are, it's money, bureaucracy, and time. And on the first, we have budget, but to issue an RFP for a vendor or to get a waiver for not issuing an RFP, to go through those regular procurement channels, we want to engage with vendors and pay them for steady state sort of peacetime efforts, to continue on Jen's analogy. But what the volunteer pool lets us do is be bursty, right? We need a volunteer for 4 hours on Friday to do this, or we need 7 volunteers for 3 days next week, and then we don't need them anymore. It's letting us do things expediently and letting us move at the speed of need, if you will, rather than putting long-term contracts into place.
The speed of need, that's great. Thanks, Russ. Let's get a couple more questions down. I think I can handle this one pretty quickly. How is this effort coordinated with the U.S. Digital Service and their associated agency-specific digital services? very briefly, we are committed to doing things only that we uniquely can do and that others aren't doing. So in a couple of cases, we've been able to coordinate with our friends over at USDS, which is, if you don't know, part of the White House that works on digital service issues across federal government. And where they are able to help out, that's great. We sort of stand aside. That's true for everybody. But other than that, there is no formal relationship between USDS and USDR. We are friendly. There's a message, there's a question here for Jonathan, and probably one that many others have. What projection model are you using for projects? Can you take that, Jonathan?
What projection model? I can take a crack at it. So we've been working with a model that was created by the Harvard Epidemiology Department, and Georgetown has sort of glommed onto that effort. And so we're partnering with the sort of brain trust at both of those universities. And that's the sort of the basics of the model. And then different assumptions are sort of being tweaked as academic or the literature on COVID and different assumptions, including fatality rate or not, and other variables sort of evolves and becomes more specific. But I hope that's speaking to the question. And it's sort of worth disclaiming that I am the sort of dunderhead on the team and not the model quant, but have been more sort of focused in terms of the sort of government partnership and interface side of things. Although I try to stay halfway conversant and fluent on what's happening on the model side of things, even if this question may not indicate as much, or this answer rather.
I think, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you guys publish your models too on the website, right?
Yeah. So the models are all open source. If you go to the website, the FAQ, you can find a link and you can portal right in.
Awesome. Sorry, Jen, I just saw a bunch of questions about volunteers. So let me just take a second to answer, because I think this is a common question we've gotten. So first off, I know a lot of you on the call have signed up to volunteer and may have not heard back from us. So I just wanted to take a minute to address that. The short version is just thank you so much for signing up to volunteer. It's honestly, we read every application. We're blown away by the generosity and how much people want to help. The short version why you maybe haven't heard back is we're actually really trying to, as Ross mentioned, sometimes these needs are very specific. It's like, we need someone for 5 hours on this day with this very specific skill set. So we do a lot of filtering down to try to find the right person. And the second thing is, in many cases, it's hard to put in someone without context. So we've had to spend some more time with folks helping explain how different aspects of our projects work. So we've had to start early on with people who have had more time. So people who are able to kind of be responsive during the middle of the day while our government partners are also working. So that said, it ends up being a filtering process. Plus, right now it's almost like we actually are looking for more government partners to work with, because the projects, because every project, there's only so many volunteers that we place per project. So short version is, we're working on it and trying to actually find more ways to help, but it's likely that we won't be able to get back in touch with every volunteer who applies.
That's great. We've had a couple of requests less of a question, I think, from folks who know us, and more of a reminder for us to mention, which I very much appreciate, that diversity really matters to USDR, as it does, I think, to the larger community of folks who care about government technology and government responsiveness. And so we're making an effort to make sure that these teams are both diverse and welcoming, and to help manage, I think, what's sometimes perceived as a divide between tech and government, of which we're all very aware. Raylene mentioned this oath that we have people sign when they're coming in. That really sets an expectation of how our groups will operate, whether it's the connection between tech and government, or simply a very welcoming and inclusive community that you're expected to be, that you'll be part of it when you get involved here. Raylene, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, not necessarily on that specific one, but just one thing I was thinking in the thing about how do people get more engaged. We're certainly not the only way to volunteer, and just there are so many organizations, many locally, probably close to where you are, that can certainly use your help. So something we actually sent out in our last volunteer newsletter was a link to a database online, a spreadsheet of a lot of very localized volunteer organizations. So happy to send that out again. But what I would suggest, if you're waiting to hear back and you really want to help, find something close to you in your city or your county, maybe a community-based organization or a nonprofit in your community that you can join up to help. We certainly see lots of other organizations go by that are also in need of help.
Great. We're coming up on time, so I think we want to spend the last few minutes just reminding you of some of the basics of how to get in touch and how to work with us. First of all, just thank you so much for showing up today. As Raylene mentioned, it's a tough position to be in where we have so many people offering help and our bandwidth to assign you is lower than we'd like. It's certainly possible that this thing goes on for a while and we will get to everybody because it's just, you want to honor the instinct that everyone has to help out. And in the meantime, please do have patience and look for other ways as well in case we don't get to all 3,000 folks. Reminders. For those of you on the line who work for government, if you think you could use our help, reach out. You may know exactly what you want us to help you do. Like Ross has had these very specific requests that we're able to turn around really quickly, or you might want to just get on the phone with us or on Zoom with us, and we'll talk through some of the skill sets that we have and some of your challenges and find a way to plug in. Either one is fine. If you have a specific request for any of us, you can also just reach out. We'll make sure we get the request to the right person who was on the panel, including Jonathan and Ross and Giuseppe. The way to reach out, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, yes, info@usdigitalresponse.org. We will make sure your question or connection gets routed to the right place. Sorry, continuing on, for those in government, I think Giuseppe and Ross modeled this perfectly. You are all doing amazing work to respond to this incredible crisis. And if what you have built for your state, county, city, or whatever is reusable by other governments, we want to help spread that. We're talking to states and counties and cities every day, more every day, and we want to make sure that we are leveraging not just the work that our volunteers do, but the work of other jurisdictions. So please reach out if you have something we can list on the website and tell others about. Obviously, if you want to volunteer and you haven't yet, the best way to do it is just to fill out that form and be as specific as you can in those questions so that when we do that filtering, your name comes up as a match, whether it's skill set or time or available or whatever. I hope I've covered the major categories, but if I haven't, again, info@usdigitalresponse.org is how to reach us. And of course, if you send us email, you'll go on our mailing list and you'll receive future updates. Anything else to add, team? All right, then I'm going to close this out with just that, as I'm sure many of you are feeling, it's such an anxious time. It's very hard to wake up and look at the front page of the paper online. And I'm getting through it by knowing that all these people are here doing amazing work, both in government and the folks that are raising their hand. It certainly makes me feel great. And I'm glad to have spent the last hour with all of you because I know you're those people. So let's stay in touch and let's get through this together. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.